Mr. Richard Hale owned 3 companies, 2 private jets, and a mansion with 12 empty bedrooms. He was 61 years old, and the doctors said his heart was failing. Not just the muscle inside his chest, though that was weak too, but something deeper. He had stopped eating properly. He had stopped sleeping. He sat in his study every night staring at old photographs of a wife who had passed away 5 years earlier and a son who never called. The best heart specialists in the country had examined him. They gave him pills, machines, and warnings. "Mr. Hale," said Dr. Whitfield, the head cardiologist, "your body is failing because your spirit has given up. I can fix valves. I cannot fix a man who doesn't want to live." Richard didn't argue. He simply nodded and went home to his enormous, silent house. That house had only 3 people left in it who cared whether he lived or died, and one of them was 2 years old. Her name was Lily. She was the daughter of Maria Santos, the housekeeper who had worked for the Hale family for 6 years. Maria brought Lily to work because she had no one else to watch her, and Mr. Hale had never objected. In fact, though he never said it aloud, the sound of small feet running across his marble floors was the only sound in that house that didn't feel like silence pretending to be peace. Lily didn't know Mr. Hale was rich. She didn't know he owned companies or jets. To her, he was just Papa Richie, a tall man with white hair who sat in a big chair and never laughed. One afternoon, while Maria was folding laundry upstairs, Lily wandered into the study. Richard was sitting in his usual chair, clutching his chest slightly, his face pale. He had felt a strange tightness all morning but told no one. He was used to pain by now, and tired of doctors fussing over him. Lily climbed onto the ottoman beside his chair, the way she always did, and looked up at him with her big brown eyes. "Papa Richie sad?" she asked. He tried to smile for her, the way adults do for children, a polite mask. But this time, something cracked. His eyes filled with tears he hadn't allowed himself in years. "Yes, sweetheart," he whispered. "Papa Richie is very sad." Lily didn't understand grief or heart disease or loneliness, but she understood sadness. She had seen it on her mother's face after her father left. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She reached up with her small hand and placed it flat against his chest, right over his heart, the way her mother sometimes did to her when she cried. "It's okay," Lily said softly. "I make it better." Richard let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. For the first time in 5 years, he didn't feel completely alone. He didn't know that this small gesture, a toddler's hand on an old man's chest, would be the beginning of something the doctors could never explain. Over the following weeks, something shifted in that enormous house. Lily began visiting the study every day after her nap, toddling in with her stuffed rabbit and immediately asking, "Papa Richie heart okay?" At first, Richard found it merely sweet, the innocent worry of a child too young to understand real illness. But he began noticing something. On the days Lily sat with him, even for 10 minutes, the tightness in his chest eased. His breathing slowed. The doctors had told him stress was killing him faster than his heart condition itself, and somehow, this little girl's presence cut through his stress, like sunlight through fog. Maria noticed the change too. "Sir, I'm so sorry if she bothers you," she said one day, mortified to find her daughter's drawings taped to Mr. Hale's mahogany desk. "Don't apologize," Richard said, and for the first time in years, Maria heard real warmth in his voice. "She's the only person in this house who isn't afraid of me." It was true. His employees feared him. His business partners respected him out of necessity. His own son, Daniel, hadn't visited in 14 months, still bitter over an old argument about the company. But Lily wasn't afraid of titles or money or reputations. To her, Richard was simply a sad old friend who needed company. One evening, Richard had a frightening episode. His chest seized up so badly that Maria had to call an ambulance. At the hospital, Dr. Whitfield ran every test imaginable. The results were troubling. His heart's rhythm was unstable, and stress hormones in his blood were dangerously high. "Mr. Hale," the doctor said gently, "I cannot keep patching this. You need a reason to want to get better. Medicine can only do so much when the heart has stopped believing in tomorrow." When Richard returned home 3 days later, pale and shaken, Lily ran to him the moment he walked through the door, despite Maria's attempts to keep her back. She wrapped her small arms around his leg. "Papa Richie came back," she said, beaming. And there, in his marble foyer, the billionaire who had everything and nothing knelt down and cried, not from sadness this time, but from something he hadn't felt in 5 years, being wanted. That night, lying in bed, Richard made a quiet decision. He didn't know if a child's love could heal a failing heart, but he knew it was the only medicine that had worked so far. Word spread slowly through the household staff, then to Dr. Whitfield himself, about the strange improvement in Mr. Hale's condition. His blood pressure, once dangerously unpredictable, had stabilized. His appetite returned. He began taking short walks in the garden, something he hadn't done in years, often with a tiny hand gripping his finger. Dr. Whitfield, skeptical by nature, came to the house personally to understand what was happening. He found Richard sitting on the garden bench, laughing, actually laughing, as Lily chased butterflies in her little yellow boots. "I haven't seen you laugh in 5 years," the doctor said, astonished. "I haven't had a reason to," Richard replied, watching the toddler stumble and giggle. "Doctor, I know you can't write a 2-year-old on a prescription pad, but I think she's keeping me alive." Dr. Whitfield studied him carefully. "There's actual science behind this, you know. Loneliness and emotional isolation are proven to worsen heart disease, sometimes as much as smoking. Connection, joy, purpose. These aren't just nice feelings. They affect cortisol, inflammation, heart rhythm. I'm not surprised her presence is helping. I'm only surprised it took this long for someone to give you a reason to heal." Richard considered this. He thought of his late wife, Eleanor, who used to say that money built walls faster than it built homes. He thought of his son, Daniel, who he hadn't truly listened to in years because he was always too busy. That evening, for the first time in 14 months, Richard picked up the phone and called Daniel. "Dad." Daniel's voice was cautious, surprised. "I've been sick," Richard said simply. "Sicker than I let anyone know. But someone has been teaching me how to feel again. I don't want to die without telling you I'm sorry. I built an empire and lost my family doing it. I don't want that anymore." There was a long silence on the line, then Daniel's voice, thick with emotion. "I'll come this weekend." When Daniel arrived 3 days later, it was Lily, small, fearless, utterly unaware of the years of tension in the room, who broke the ice. She marched straight up to the stranger and held up her stuffed rabbit. "You sad too?" she asked. Daniel laughed despite himself, kneeling down to her level. "A little," he admitted. "I make it better," Lily said, patting his knee with great seriousness. Richard watched his estranged son laugh, really laugh, for the first time in years, and felt something in his chest that wasn't pain. It was hope. Despite the emotional healing, Richard's body was still fighting a real, physical battle. One night, 3 months after Lily had first placed her tiny hand over his heart, his condition took a serious turn. He collapsed in his study, and this time it was no false alarm. His heart had gone into a dangerous arrhythmia. Maria found him and screamed for help. Daniel, who had moved back into the guest house to be near his father, rushed in. The ambulance arrived within minutes, and Richard was taken to the hospital in critical condition. Lily, only 3 years old now, didn't understand hospitals or emergency rooms. She only understood that Papa Richie was gone from the house, and the house felt wrong without him. For 2 days, Richard lay in the ICU, unconscious, machines breathing for him in steady, mechanical rhythms. Dr. Whitfield warned the family to prepare for the worst. "His heart muscle is exhausted," he said quietly to Daniel and Maria in the hallway. "We've done everything medicine can do." Maria, holding Lily's hand, felt helpless. But Lily kept tugging at her sleeve. "I want to see Papa Richie," she insisted, again and again, with the stubbornness only a toddler can have. The hospital staff, against typical protocol, allowed a brief visit. Daniel had explained, through tears, how much this little girl meant to his father. Lily was lifted gently onto the edge of the hospital bed. She looked at the tubes and machines with wide, solemn eyes, then did the only thing she knew. She placed her small hand flat against his chest, right over his heart, just like always. "Papa Richie," she whispered, "wake up. I make it better." The room was silent except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Maria wept softly. Daniel held his breath. And then, the monitor's rhythm, which had been weak and irregular for hours, began to steady. Slowly, subtly. Dr. Whitfield, checking the readings moments later, stared at the screen in quiet disbelief. "His heart rate has stabilized," he said softly. I can't explain why, medically right this moment, but it has." No one in that room believed Lily had performed a miracle in the way fairy tales describe. But everyone in that room believed something had happened that science alone could not fully capture: the simple, undeniable power of being loved and having a reason to fight. 3 days later, Richard opened his eyes. The first thing he asked for, in a hoarse whisper, was not his lawyer or his business partners. "Where's Lily?" Richard's recovery, while still requiring real medical care, surprised even his doctors with its steadiness. Dr. Whitfield, normally a man of cautious medical language, finally admitted something rare for a man of science. "I've treated heart patients for 30 years. Medicine mends the body. But I've never seen anything mend a will to live the way that little girl did." When Richard finally returned home, the mansion that had once felt like a museum of loneliness now felt, for the first time in years, like an actual home. Daniel had decided to stay, taking a smaller role at the company so he could rebuild the relationship he'd nearly lost. Maria, who had once worried she might lose her job once Mr. Hale no longer needed her daughter's company, was stunned when Richard called her into his study. "Maria," he said, "I want to set up a trust for Lily's education, her future, anything she needs. Not as charity, as gratitude. Your daughter gave an old man his life back, in more ways than the doctors can explain." Maria cried, overwhelmed, but Richard held up a hand gently. "There's something else. I don't want you to just work in this house anymore, watching the clock until you can take Lily home. I want this to feel like her home too, and yours. Stay. Truly stay. Not as staff, as family." It wasn't about money, though the money would change Maria and Lily's future forever. It was about something Richard had learned the hard way, that all his wealth had never once made him feel as alive as one small hand on his chest, telling him he mattered. Months passed. Richard grew stronger. He started attending Daniel's company meetings again, not to control everything, but to mentor, to listen, to be present in a way he never had been as a younger, hungrier man. Every evening, without fail, Lily would find him in the garden or the study, climb up beside him, and ask the same question she'd asked 100 times before. "Papa Richie heart okay?" And every time, Richard would smile, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes, and say, "Better than okay, sweetheart. You fixed it." On Lily's 4th birthday, Richard threw her a party in the very garden where they used to chase butterflies. Surrounded by Daniel, Maria, the doctors who had once given up on him, and a little girl in a yellow dress with a cake nearly bigger than she was, Richard stood and raised a glass. "They say money can't buy happiness," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "They're right. I had more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and I was the loneliest man alive. It took the smallest hands in this house to remind me what actually keeps a heart beating. Not machines, not wealth, but love, given freely, expecting nothing in return." He knelt down to Lily's height, the way he always did now, and kissed the top of her head. "You didn't just cure my heart, sweetheart," he whispered. "You gave me back my life." And in that garden, surrounded by people who had once been strangers bound only by employment and obligation, but who had become, through the innocent love of a toddler, a real family, Richard Hale finally understood that the richest man in the world isn't the one with the most money. It's the one who is loved, and who knows how to love back.